by Dr. Neil Harrison. He's been teaching for 30 years. He looks pretty young. It seems to be aimed at new grads who are coming out of uni and going into their first placement in schools with lots of Aboriginal kids. The aim of this book is to fill in the gaps in your knowledge until you get out there and meet some Aboriginal people and learn from them. And I reckon that there is really key. He seems to be focusing on that a lot, that it's all about relationships with Aboriginal people and understanding the worlds that the kids come from and their social connections. So there's lots of similarities between this chapter and probably this book and that Herbert 2012 article where she was talking about engagement. A little caution to begin with it. It can be easy to fall into the trap of stereotyping where one assumes that all Aboriginal children prefer working in groups or that they never ask questions. I just was quite happy to know that there are two Aboriginal stereotypes. Page 5. Children's behaviour is not always governed by how the teacher teaches. Sometimes their behaviour has more to do with the disputes at home that are subsequently brought to school. Now, definitely would not be allowed to use that as a cop-out in my last school. One thing we did was family time every morning, and because we only had 20 kids with 2 teachers, we actually had time to speak to all of them individually and ask them how they were, and kids that we knew had traumatic stuff going on at home, give them time to have a chat about that. And sometimes that would, sometimes they'd get a bit emotional. And the idea behind that was that kids can't learn if they're really upset, and that we have to bring them into a space where their neural pathways can fire freely. So a place where they feel loved and accepted, and the oxytocin can flow. Whereas if their little minds teeming with cortisol, stress and anxiety, not much learning is going to happen. So family time went for half an hour every morning. So it'd be interesting to see if that would work with Aboriginal kids. Because I guess we can't control what happens outside of the classroom, but certainly not just going to write them off and say that they can't learn or they can't behave because of dramas that are happening at home. Page 5. Okay, page 5. Here we go. This one I wrote down just because I didn't really realise this was the case, but new teachers working in schools with a significant number of Aboriginal children often become frustrated by the apparent lack of progress in the classroom. They don't want to learn, so what can I do? Of course they want to learn, otherwise they wouldn't be there. Chris Sarah, here he is.
The story of how we made it happen.
He's an Aboriginal principal. There he is.
In Sherbrooke School, all the students needed was encouragement to believe they were strong and smart.
Okay. So, Chris Sarah had a lot of success when he was a principal at Sherbrooke School. And he gave some tips, and he was saying there are usually some very powerful families in the town, and this will affect how children perform at school. And he added that when he first arrived, the political issues were far more crucial than the teaching programs. He outlined his approach to involving parents. A lot of the elders in particular came into the school. They had a part in informing the development of the Aboriginal Studies program, and they had a lot to do with the delivery of the program. We set about honouring their presence in the school and their role in the community by having special functions for them. The parents became involved because I would get out and talk to them. For most of the first 6 months, I spent more time out of the school than inside it. He's written a few books and things. One article, Young, I'm Black and Deadly. strategies for improving outcomes for Aboriginal students. And there's a little vid. And he was really focusing on getting outside of the school and making friends and understanding the community. Okay, power relationships in terms of history. So the two key events which have contributed to the tragically unequal power relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people: the forced removal of Aboriginal children from their parents, the relocation of Aboriginal people from their homes to reserves, and then also the dog tags and different massacres of Aboriginal people. For instance, the 1928 Coniston massacre. And then Dr. Neil mentions a bit more casually also they're changing the names of places. So like just calling Perth Perth instead of calling it Noongar land, which we now call Perth. Kind of rips, you can see how that kind of rips the rug out from under you when you've been calling something a certain thing for generations and then someone just comes in and says, no, it's not called that, it's called this. Bit rude. Okay, then our own personal discourses. Are we engaging in deficit discourse to position people in negative spaces? This has a lot to do with our last unit. And then this was a really interesting point, which I hadn't really thought of. The whole like closing the gap language. It's like saying that so all those different social outcomes like health, education, it's like the non-Aboriginal people's achievements are the benchmark for which Aboriginals should be trying to get to, and we should be helping Aboriginals be as good as non-Aboriginals. It's kind of like, well, that is actually a bit rude. So maybe we should be asking Aboriginal people what goals they have for their communities rather than saying that we all need to help them be like non-Aboriginals. So all that government language is not really helping. Even though everyone, of course, I can see why they do it, because of course when you give out those stats that, you know, Aboriginal kids are 20%, doing 20% worse on that plan, like, people don't want that. Nobody wants the Aboriginal kids to be doing worse. But just by making the goal where the non-Aboriginal people are, I think we need a better goalpost. Okay, language. So most Aboriginal kids are speaking different dialects or languages at home. Whilst white Anglo-Saxon kids are speaking standard English, so this of course goes into all of that stuff of learning to learn in a second language and all those strategies that we learn about, which I again got to use last year, which is handy. This was interesting. Aboriginal, this top one here. Aboriginal students will probably focus on who is saying what to whom and how it is being said, rather than on content. Different to us task-focused, factual minds. Actually, this was last year. I really had to improve how I greeted people in the morning, because I would tend to just come to work and just want to get straight into it and start ticking off tasks that I needed to get done. But I worked out pretty quickly that it was really important that I greeted everyone properly, and I noticed that all the Mauritian teachers greeted each other very properly. Bonjour, madame, comment ça va? With very respectful eye contact, and then there would then be a conversation as to how the person was. And whereas me and the American boss, we would just want to come in and get cracking and get working, and I really realised that to create a vibe within the school where people felt respected and valued, that greeting people properly and not in a rushed manner was really valuable in setting the social emotional tone of the day. This was a challenge for me, challenged my patience. Aboriginal students will rarely attack their schoolwork with a passion. They are more likely to work at it quietly, slowly and carefully while observing how others are doing it. Also sounds like Mauritian kids, also sounds like my daughter. Mick Dodson, who also had a lot of success, Australian of the Year. Was he a principal or a teacher? I don't know. Anyway, his 4 keys for success were intense community involvement, local decision making, which is particularly important within the historical context of non-Aboriginal people making decisions and taking power away from Aboriginal people, locally controlled resources, same issue again, I guess, and respectful support by non-Aboriginal parts of the community. And last little note, obviously the word Aboriginal people is a huge generalisation in itself because there's so many tribes and groups. So learning the actual tribal names, specific names for the people that you're talking about is better. So, yeah, I mean, I only really know Noongar. Darong, I think, is... Darong is the space we now call Sydney. But yeah, got to learn some more. Good chapter. Nice intro. Thanks, Dr. Neil.